Call the Land Use Committee meeting for Sioux Falls City Council to order. Today is the 15th of July and 4:30 p.m. 5:25, I guess. We have a busy agenda today, so I would like to first of all have approval of the minutes of our last meeting.
So move.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. First agenda item is right-of-way ordinance review. Kurt, is Kurt going to be here doing that, or? Oh, we get the big guy.
Good afternoon. Shannon Verhey with the Engineering Division of Public Works. And Kurt is not able to join us today. They just had their third baby on Sunday, so he's spending some quality time with the family.
Thank you.
For the others on the committee, Kurt Peppel is one of the civil engineers in our office who really helped spearhead this effort. A lot of this presentation, a lot of the background information that we researched, what was led by him. So I definitely want to give him credit for helping develop this. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. And
please.
Yeah, what I'm here to do today is to give you an update on the proposed changes to the landscape ordinance that we would like to make. And just going through a short agenda here, what I want to do, just kind of broke it into 4 parts. One is we want to talk, we were here last October and we presented you with some of the challenges that we had with our landscape ordinance, some of how we're bound by their existing ordinances, especially as it relates to rock in the right-of-way. Also want to spend the bulk of the time on, we put a committee together to review the ordinance, and we met several times over the course of the past year, and we want to present those findings to you. And also want to give you an update on some encroachment issues that we presented last fall, and as well as some mailbox issues that we presented last fall. So to recap what we went over last October, we talked about landscaping in the right-of-way, specifically landscaping rock in the right-of-way, as well as vegetation in the right-of-way. Those are a couple of things we focused on. We also talked about encroachments in the right-of-way, how there isn't a specific ordinance prohibiting them. And then we also talked about mailbox, how we have a lack of construction standards and requirements for those. So the first thing as we get started here, just want to get everybody familiar with, when we talk about a right-of-way, what are we discussing? Well, generally the right-of-way is from an area that's anywhere from 1, 2 to 3 feet behind the sidewalk. So an area 1 to 2 feet behind the sidewalk across the roadway. And what's in our right-of-way, or what's the purpose of our right-of-way? Well, first of all, one of the main things is public transportation, whether it's vehicular or pedestrian. The other main function of our right-of-way, it's a corridor for public and private utilities. As you see from the illustration, that this is not uncommon to have this amount of utilities in our right-of-way. So again, those are 2 of the items that we really focus on when we talk about right-of-way management. So one of the things we did after our presentation last fall is we put together a review committee to look at our existing ordinances, kind of look at some of the history, look at some of the scope of the problems that we're having out there, and then try and come up with a solution that we could take this committee, a recommendation on changes that we need to make. That committee was comprised of city staff as well as members of the public. We had various representatives from Public Works, Planning, Zoning, the Parks Department, as well as some assistants from our legal office. But I do want to focus on the right-hand column there, where we had Councilor Rothling was on it. We had representation from the Home Builders Association, several members of the Sioux Falls Beautiful group. We had private utility representatives. We also had landscaping representatives, and then we had a landscape architect also serve on this committee. And we met about, I believe it was right around 5 or 6 times that we met, going from last, I'll say early winter through the spring. One of the things our committee did, we wanted a goal for the committee. And the goal was to review and update the existing right-of-way ordinances to ensure that they're preserving and protecting right-of-way corridors, clearly defined in support of all other ordinances, consistently and impartially enforced, and probably the big one here, consistent with community established standards. So why is updating necessary? These two slides I'm going to show right now, they look like great landscaping. Nice, neat, clean. The dilemma we have, those are violations of our ordinance. Right now, it basically says you cannot have rock. And now, here's the ordinance. The black highlights kind of some of the key points. Basically, our landscaping ordinance says we need to have living ground cover, i.e. grass. And then it prohibits items like rocks, concrete, asphalt. There are some ability for the city to grant exemptions, like concrete or stones. But if you notice in Part B on the bottom there, specifically it says this exemption shall not include the use of loose rock or asphalt for landscaping material. Excuse me. So anytime we say rock, that is a violation of our ordinance. Excuse me. Sorry. One of the things we did as background, excuse me. Summer cold's getting
You're not
me
used to talking so much like.
No, I'm not. So.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, one of the things we did is we actually went out and inventoried 4 different areas around town to get a grasp on the magnitude of the issue that we have going on. These next series of slides are just photos, thanks, Ken, showing examples of our the landscaping that we have out there. Some of these photos are good, some are bad. We just try to really give a representation of what we have out there. And I'm just going to thumb through these, not going to spend a lot of time on them. So what are some of the key findings? And I just want to point out the yellow highlighted column there, those 4 areas. If you look at the landscaping rock section, those are numbers of areas where we found rock in the right-of-way. So area 1 had 49, then 69, 79, 87. You know, that's approximately 300 violations right there. That's just 4 areas. So if you want to kind of project that over the entire city, there could be thousands of violations of the ordinance. One of the other things that the committee did is we looked at why do people landscape in the right-of-way? Well, we kind of boiled it down to 2 things, or 3 things. The first one is aesthetics. People they take pride in their homes, they take pride in their yards, they want it to look nice. Site limitations, small congested areas. And the other one is issues with growing or maintaining grass, either through our winter maintenance operations, our tree canopy. You know, in the older neighborhoods, you have tree canopy, it shades out the grass, or just general street debris, sand, mud. So these are all photos of maybe some of those reasons why people do it. So with all that background, kind of understanding the magnitude of the problem, kind of looking at the rationale, why do people do this? One of the things we looked at is what level of landscaping should we allow? I think the committee was unanimous and we need to do something to allow some level of landscaping. I'm going to show you 3 slides that kind of show the different ends of the spectrum, and then want to show you what we are trying to target as a committee. This slide right here basically shows no landscaping in the parkway/boulevard area. If you notice, there's no rock or anything, it's just grass. That's kind of one end. Then you got the other end where, you know what, kind of anything goes. You know, allow everything to be filled with rock. Size of rock doesn't matter. Just putting it out, but again, allowing no restrictions on that. As well as in the lower left there, you can see some vegetation where some people have their flowers in the right of way. site issues and stuff like that. This is where the committee we tried to settle on this. A series of pictures like this is what our focus was on. Nice, we do allow, that was our goal, to develop some sort of recommendation where the photos that you see would be allowed in the right-of-way. So to put in writing what I was just trying to illustrate through photos there, our recommendation is going to be require living ground cover as our baseline, turf grass, not exceeding 8 inches, which is in partnership with the the nuisance vegetation ordinance. And then of that ground cover, of that grass area, allow 20% of that to be covered with landscaping, such as 1 to 3 inch rock. Actually allow some plant material in there, not exceeding 36 inches high, so we don't have site issues at driveways and at corners. Allow bricks and pavers. You know, if somebody wants to put some brick edging around their tree to contain the landscaping rock, we wanted to make provisions for that. Some mulch. And then we still wanted to continue to prohibit asphalt, concrete paving, or vegetable and fruit plants. We don't want our parkways to turn into gardens or anything like that. So here's an illustrative example of that 20% area that we're talking about. So if we have that green area, if that's the grass area in the front yard, allowing 20%, we show 4 areas there. Again, it's just an example of the amount of rock type landscaping they could do in their parkway. So again, that 20%, that would be kind of the baseline recommendation. Then we also wanted to give some additional considerations for along arterial streets and collector streets. Those take the bulk of our winter maintenance operations as far as with some of the salts and sand we use. So some of those present some special challenges. One of the things that we're going to propose here is allowing residents above and beyond that 20% is to actually install splash guards. What's a splash guard? Splash guard's nothing more than a buffer strip between the curb and gutter and the grass. It allows that spray that comes off the vehicles during the wintertime, that splash. It just, instead of grass there, which is susceptible to some of that chemical splash, it just creates a barrier there. So here's an illustration. I believe this is from South Sycamore Avenue, where you can see here that maybe some of the winter maintenance operations have caused some of the grass to die along there. So what we want to do is give the ability to the property owner to actually install buffer strip or a splash guard in that area to prevent some of that kill of the grass. We also want to make provisions. This picture's from Kiwanis Avenue. If you've driven down that street, the area between the sidewalk and the curb and gutter there is very narrow. It makes growing, maintaining living ground cover in that area very difficult at best, and we'd actually like to make some provisions along those high volume arterial streets such as Kiwanis. Maybe just fill in those areas with concrete, because you can't it's difficult to maintain grass. You know, just kind of a side note, that's certainly something we're looking at from an engineering standpoint on our newer design streets, to actually incorporate the use of splash guards or create enough buffer strips so you can actually grow some vegetation in those areas. These are just the concepts. We would recommend an ordinance supplemented by a policy. On the general landscaping ordinance that I initially talked about, that 20%, that wouldn't be permit driven or anything. That would just be requirements that the property owners have to abide by. On the splash guards, we actually would like that to be a permitting process for a few reasons. One is we want to be able to talk to those homeowners to make sure, you know, we may be rebuilding an arterial street in 4 or 5 years, and we don't want them to make an investment into some infrastructure that we may end up having to remove when we widen the street, as well as that's where more of our utilities are at. We also want to just have some general size restrictions, color requirements, just some processes of dealing with the private and public utility repairs that we have to do there. So implementation process. How do we, if we were to proceed with this 20% requirement, how do we begin to implement that as it relates to the existing thousands of violations that occur out there? And one of the, we looked at the current ordinance, and the current ordinance went into effect in 1991. One of the things we looked at or considered is, you know what, let's just grandfather everybody in and just, you know what, if you put rock in, just so be it, we'll just kind of look the other way. While working with our city attorney's office, you know, they basically said we can't grandfather in an existing violation. So how do we work through that? Well, going back to those 4 areas again, we basically analyzed, used our judgment and went, if we went with the 20% requirement, how many of those violations would kind of automatically be in compliance? And these pie charts here, the blue represents the amount that we feel would be in compliance. So you can see the different areas, areas 1 and 2 are above 85%. We would kind of automatically draw most property owners into compliance. Areas 3 and 4, a little more difficult. Area 3, it's a little lower because you have, those are areas where people filled in more entire boulevards instead of partial boulevards or parkways. So to kind of summarize the committee's findings, we want to allow some landscaping, 20% is the recommendation. You know, we feel that this establishes a community standard, brings most people in line, as well as gives some good guidelines for people wanting to landscape in their parkways, and then it still allows the right-of-way to function as intended, you know, for vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, as well as those corridors for our private and public utilities. So that kind of wraps up the landscaping aspect of it. Just have a couple slides I want to show you, just some updates on the encroachments and mailboxes. First of all, on the encroachments, what is an encroachment? It's something it's usually a big structure within our right-of-way that shouldn't be there. In the case of like the top right picture, it's some big rocks. Lower left, apparently somebody decided to put a basketball hoop at the end of a cul-de-sac for their kids to play in the street, as well as large brick structures are just some examples. We don't have a specific city ordinance prohibiting this, so when we have these types of violations, we actually have to refer to state law and go about it that way. Our recommendation, as we work with city attorney's office on this, actually we're engineering, public works is going to partner up with our city attorney's office to see if we can maybe administratively tweak our process a little bit and take care of most of these issues. So at this time, we're not recommending any ordinance. We're not recommending creating any ordinance for that. On the mailbox, again, we don't have any design standards or construction requirements for mailboxes. And a lot of what was driving this was the brick mailboxes in our right-of-way, which can potentially represent a traffic hazard since they're so close behind the curb, present some snow removal challenges with the wings and stuff. We're actually recommending putting any changes to this on hold right now, and that's essentially being driven by the post office. They're going through a lot of changes right now. If you read the news, they have some serious financial challenges. So they're looking at how they do business, not only locally, but at a national level. And their goal is to go to more cluster box units, CBUs, these metal structures where you have 10, 15, 20 mailboxes in one. Everybody would have a key to it. So just by the post office's own administrative procedures, we may not need any construction requirements because the standard mailbox may go away on new construction. So we're kind of in a wait and see approach with the post office on that. So what are our next steps? Basically, if with concurrence of the committee here, we would like to proceed to the next step as far as formally drafting updates to our ordinance in conjunction with reaching out to the public. And specifically, we want to reach out to the landscapers of the city. Just they're the ones who will be doing a lot of the work, as well as they would be part of the educational tool that we have to educate homeowners as far as what they can and cannot do in their parkway and boulevard. So that's our next steps, is we'd like to work on the ordinance change and public outreach.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Questions from the committee? Yes, Councilor Staggers.
I guess I have a question as to how all this came about. The reason I'm asking is because the many years I've been on the city council, I haven't heard people complain about the right-of-way. So how did this come about?
Chad Hevey with the engineering division. Historically, we've dealt with it as on a complaint basis. Somebody calls, turns into complaint, whoever's got rock in the right of way, and we've handled it that way. Or as city staff has been out seeing people do things, if we see there's a pile of landscape rock in their driveway and there's nothing in their boulevard, we've tried to reach out to them to let them know that what they're planning on doing is not in compliance with city ordinance. And so we had a complaint probably last year, and we followed the procedures and protocol and notified this person of the violation, and then in turn we received I would say 100 to 200. She turned in then 100 to 200 complaints. And then I worked with the city's attorney's office and said, we have a real issue here. And so that's what kind of got the process started, is realizing that we had hundreds, potentially 1,000 or more ordinance violations.
So if I can, just once again, you said one person started this?
We had a complaint on an individual. We went out to the cul-de-sac and noticed that there was several violations in that cul-de-sac. We then put them all on notice that they were in violation of city ordinance and required them to come in compliance. And then one of those individuals turned around then and gave us a list of, I mean, it was over 100. And at that point, I worked with the city attorney. We discussed it. We knew we had an issue, and thus we've spent countless hours and meetings working on this because it is an ordinance violation.
Go ahead, one more.
I'm aware, of this ordinance that we have, and so when I do walking, I see a lot of violations. But hey, it doesn't bother me at all because it doesn't look bad at all. I guess my concern here is we're getting involved in really a lot of micromanagement. And this is going to make it even more difficult for people. I mean, if we just let people continue the way they are now, and the way I see it is I walk every day, I see a little rock there, a little rock here, little flowers there. It's okay. It's not hurting anything at all. But now we're really going to make a big deal of this. That's my concern.
Councilor Jamison.
Chad or Shannon, I'm not sure, but the real question for me, I suppose, starts with what is our obligation to the utility, private or public, to, I mean, if it was concreted, everybody concreted their boulevards in, and then a utility company needed to come through there, and they've got to tear all that out. The responsibility lies with the landowner to repair it if they want it repaired, right? But what is, maybe I'm speaking too much, but what I'm trying to figure out is what are we as a homeowner obligated to provide to the utility companies access to our land.
And that's why we had members of the private utilities involved, because that's, I mean, typically today when they go through that boulevard area, they're required to put back what was there.
Oh.
And I'm going to have to probably defer to Shannon if that ever got brought up about them tearing up concrete and putting it back. Did he? So, yeah, like just what Shannon said, they would typically have to restore what is there. And so, you know, we, even in areas in the right-of-way today where we do have some stamped concrete and things like that, if changes have to be, or repairs have to be made, we put the stamp back. Now, it's not going to match color-wise, but we try to do the best job we can to, and that's why we would limit the concrete to the arterials and the collectors. So, I mean, everything else we would envision on my cul-de-sac would be the grass with, you know, maybe rock around your fire hydrant, rock around the mailbox, maybe around the trees or something like that. So,
Go ahead.
The rock. I saw in your pictures, and I have even drove through some streets looking for rock, and I do see a lot of rock, and certainly you don't have to cut the rock every week like you might have grass, or try to regrow it if the chemicals get on it. But what is the real problem for the city and for having rock? I mean, I can see if a plow gets up there and hits some of that rock, that can create a problem, but what is the real issue with rock?
I think there's two issues. One is that it can look nice as long as it's maintained. I mean, it doesn't need to be maintained like grass does, but there needs to be some things done. I mean, it's eventually going to get full of sand, maybe some dirt. It's going to grow weeds. I mean, you have to spray them. And if it's done properly, I mean, and maintained, it looks nice, and I don't think it's an issue. The other item is when people don't maintain it. I mean, you saw pictures of rocks are stacked so high they're falling into the right-of-way. You get people riding bikes, you get people driving cars, they get thrown up in the air. So I think, once again, if things are maintained and they're installed properly. The other issue today is that it's clearly against city ordinance to put any type of rock in the right-of-way. I'm stealing all Shannon's thunder. He should be answering these questions maybe, so.
Councilor Anderson, you had a question?
Well, Councilman Jameson sort of stole that thunder, so that's okay. On page 17, implementation background, talks about the current ordinance in 1991, no landscaping, only living ground cover. City Attorney's Office recommendation cannot grandfather in violations. And then you discuss, Shannon, on the complies with proposed ordinance. If we can't grandfather in those people that are already complying with a proposed ordinance, how are we going to deal with that?
So I'd go back to the slide that showed that pie graph. So, for instance, if we would do the 20%, allow 20%, for instance, area 1 there, 90 to 95% of those people would be in compliance with the ordinance. They would not have to be grandfathered in or anything. They're just in compliance. So maybe your question is, how do we address the people that are still out of compliance? And yeah, that's one of the challenges we have. No matter what number we pick, there are individuals out there that will rock their entire parkway. So unless we would choose 100%, there's people that are going to be in violation that we'll have to work with. How would we go about handling that? Some of the things that we've talked about is conceptually, we don't want to be out there, if we were to change this next week, writing citations. We want to try and maybe we would give people an amount of time or develop some sort of program. We also talked about maybe piggybacking it on with our sidewalk inspection program, where we wouldn't just randomly be going throughout the city. Maybe when we do those sidewalk inspections, which generally we get through the city about once every 10 years, maybe we would target sections with that, and then we'd work with those property owners to first get them in compliance.
If I may?
Yes.
Thank you. You're saying, okay, let's use Area 1. You're saying 90 to 95% would comply to the new ordinance, proposed ordinance.
Yes.
Okay, now, we're going to say with the new proposed ordinance, we're looking at allowing bricks and pavers, normal size rock, things like that, right? So
Yes.
people who are already have their right-of-way with rock and pavers, we're going to say they're now in compliance?
Yes.
Isn't that a grandfather? Isn't that a way around it?
I'll defer to Paul on that one, so.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. The discussion was had in terms of grandfathering in, that there are probably several thousand violations at this point. And so if we take the ordinance and we say, all right, 20% is what we're going to allow, 20% rock, okay? Then what about those people who before that date have 80% or 90% rock in their right-of-way? Are we going to grandfather them in and let them keep their 80% rock or 90% rock? And that's where the discussion of grandfathering came in. If you have 20% or less, and that's the ordinance that gets put into place, then yeah, you're fine. There's no ordinance violation there. But we're not going to grandfather in people who never were in, who violated and never were following the ordinance. So that if you have 80% rock in your right-of-way at a time when you are allowed 0, and then the city council decides that you can have 20% rock, not grandfathering in the people who have 80% and 90% and more than that 20%. That's where the grandfathering discussion came up.
Okay, but right now, anybody who has rock in the right-of-way is in violation.
That's correct.
So no matter what, if it's 20% or 80%, there are going to be some people that are going to be grandfathered in.
No, it is our position that they're not grandfathered in because they, where the grandfathering comes in is if when you did something, it was legal, and then you get grandfathered in because the city council has made it more stringent. So let's say that the city council had allowed 50% rock in your right-of-way, and we're now changing it to 20%. So where that would come in is, all right, what about those people who put in 50% at a time when the city council allowed 50%? Are those people going to be grandfathered in? And so if you say those people are going to be grandfathered in, you'd allow the people who had 50% to keep it, even though the new ordinance is 20%. The discussion was had here is, under the current ordinance, no rock is allowed. So if it goes to 20% rock is allowed, should there be some benefit given to people who have 80 or 90% who were never in compliance? So they're in a much different situation than if the city council is now making it more restrictive, going from 50 to 20, because we'd be going from 0 to 20. So what they did if they had more than 20 was never legal at the time, so that's not going to be allowed.
One last.
Go ahead.
Does that make sense or not, Counselor? I mean,
See, this is where I think that
Sure.
we're sort of splitting some things here.
Sure.
Because right now, we are at 0%.
correct.
So if we change the ordinance to 20% and we allow those people who have 20% rock in their right-of-way, that's grandfathering to me. Now, what are you going to call that? How is that? You're just going to say now that they're in compliance?
The people who are in 20% are in compliance. We have the option at this point of, we could proceed with thousands of nuisance violations for people who are in violation of the right-of-way landscaping ordinance. Not the direction we've taken up to this point. I haven't heard anybody in the administration or the council ask us to do that. But, we certainly could go out and we could file thousands of nuisance violations or write citations. The question is, and what came up and what Chad Heavey was talking about is, okay, but for when we get complaints and we go out there and there is a nuisance violation that the city is asked to proceed on, right now we're in a situation where we say, yes, there is a nuisance violation, but we're not going to do anything about it, or you know, if they point out 100 different nuisance violations and they're all in violation, should we be citing these hundreds of people or thousands of people? And so that's the situation the city's in right now. If it's an ordinance that's not being complied with, one is, let's enforce it and let's cite thousands of people. Or the other option that was discussed and what this committee was looking at is, let's do something to make the ordinance potentially more reasonable and more satisfactory to everybody's liking.
I think what you're saying, if I can put it a little different way, is that because the ordinance was not enforced does not necessarily mean that we're grandfathering some people in later on if this kind of 20% rule goes in. It meant that we didn't enforce what we had before, and the new one will be enforced.
And now if you're under 20%, we won't proceed. I mean, even though you were in violation before, we're not going to pursue enforcement actions against those people. If you're at 30, 40, or 50, and you're in violation, then we could enforce those matters.
Okay, and I'm going to ask one question here. We're going to look at that with the sidewalk ordinances as they go around. They will mark whether or not they're in compliance with the ground cover ordinance too, if a new one would go through. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, thanks.
I mean, we need to, you know, first we need to back up because we've only inventoried
Right.
4 areas of the city, and there could be 60 areas or 70 areas. And so what we're saying is we're going to have a date potentially of when something new would go into effect. And so the new ordinance would deal with how we're going to move forward based on a given date, and then how are we going to address the current violations. And so one of the ideas we're talking about is, okay, we first need to, you know, we'd probably start with these 4 areas that we've inventoried, but another good option for us that would be if an effective time of our use or our staff's use of time would be to, as we're out doing our annual sidewalk inspections, we could also then be doing an inventory of the right-of-way landscaping violations. So that's how we would potentially do the inventory to even know the number of violations out there.
Councilor Staggers, you had another question?
Yeah, Chad, do you have any idea how many people in Sioux Falls are even aware of our present ordinance? I mean, I'm aware of it, but I would suspect that probably not a whole lot of people are.
Yep, I would agree with that.
And so, you know, if this would ever become an ordinance, you know, what you're proposing, and once you tell people this, I have a suspicion they're not going to be very happy at all. What is going on here?
Are you talking of looking forward or looking back?
Forward, yes. Well, in fact, I've already had conversation with somebody who's very concerned about flowers. Will her flowers be legal or illegal? And, you know, she's had the flowers there for years and years. This is just going to create problems unnecessarily. I mean, I can understand, you know, dealing with vegetation and things like that when it comes to an intersection, you know, being able to see the street and things like that. Okay, that's understandable, and I think most people understand that. But this other stuff, just for aesthetics, because that's one of the things we have here, aesthetics.
I do think flowers would be allowed under 36 inches. Is that correct? I mean,
under 36. Right?
Yeah, you can. I don't want you to plant sweet corn.
36. She has over 36, yeah. Well, anyway, this is going to cause all kinds of needless problems. I don't know why we're doing this to ourselves.
Councilor Jamison?
I'm not sure who, Shannon or probably Shannon. On your goals, the goals of the review committee, in the order that they were presented here, you could maybe go to that slide. I don't know what number it is, but yeah, it was towards the front. Right, so it starts off with what I kind of summarize them as aesthetics was first, clear definition, which I understand is important for enforcement. Third is enforcement. And the fifth is a consistent standard across the community. Just when I'm sitting back and absorbing this, thinking about it, for me, the goals are a little different order, but safety would be number one. If there's something there that's obstructing the view for people, I mean, if grass grew, like you say, more than 36 inches and a dog jumped out, you'd never see that thing till the last second, or a human, potentially, a kid. And that's a problem. So safety is number one for me. The other one is accessibility for the utilities, people to be able to get in and out of there without too much of an effort. And then aesthetics. And then maybe enforcement. But having aesthetics be your number one goal, are these really in any order, or were they just kind of listed?
I would actually say aesthetics. I would say the community established standards is the aesthetics component of it. So if you notice, that's on the bottom there. And going back to the original right-of-way slide, purpose of the right-of-way, public transportation, vehicular and pedestrian. You know what, that's a safety component of that, as well as the private and public utilities. So you go to the goals, preserving and protecting those right-of-way corridors. Maybe I could have phrased that better, but yes, that's what that is. That's going to the heart of that right-of-way. I think just one additional comment I would like to make. Chad had indicated about an individual last year who had called to complain. Our office gets 1 to 2 calls per week from citizens asking, hey, I want to be in compliance with the ordinance. They do ask us about the ordinance. What can we do? Well, we tell them the ordinance. Oh, you can't have rock in your boulevard. Well, all my neighbors do it. Well, sorry, but we as city staff cannot tell property owners to willingly violate the law, so we have to say no. On the existing ordinances, you can't have rock in your right-of-way. So.
Okay, Councilor Anderson. We'll take another, we'll go for a little while longer on this.
Okay. I guess I'm going to go to the goals of reviewing of the review committee, consistent with community established standards. You know, I mean, you guys have done a great job up to this point. You've had a nice committee put together that has taken a look at some things. At what point are we going to start taking public input on the changes that we're going to do here? As far as what is the timeline that you want to try to change this policy or to create an ordinance?
Well, that's that's something we'd be looking potentially for your input on, because to me this is probably a hard subject, or a how do you get public input? I mean, you invite people to a right-of-way landscaping public meeting, they're potentially not even going to know what we're talking about. So one of I think one of the most important things we can do is make sure that our contractors are educated, so that when they're asked to put in the entire boulevard of rock, they can properly educate the homeowners. I mean, we're struggling with that too, as to how we started with Sioux Falls Beautiful, I think, and but that is something that we're we could have a series of public meetings throughout the next 3 months. I don't think the attendance is going to be very well, so that's why we thought we reach out to the landscaping community, and we reach out to the suppliers of the landscaping products. I know we've done that in the past when we've made irrigation changes, how you can sprinkle your yard, and done brochures to, here's a brochure on what I can do and what I can't do. And so, I mean, I'd say at this point we would like to, potentially have an ordinance in place, potentially January 1, potentially early 15, where right before the landscaping season is upon us.
Okay. With that being said, I guess I'd like to see maybe this issue stay with land use for at least another meeting,
and then we can put something on the web, we can put something on Channel 16. You have a list of a couple hundred people who are in violation right now that we could notify and ask the public to come in and comment on some of these changes or what maybe they would like to see. And that way we're not asking the administration to go out and have meetings wherever, that we can do that right here. And then people can see that on Channel 16 and understand that there's some changes coming. And if they feel the need, they can come in and make that public testimony.
I know when they did Shape Sioux Falls, they had several meetings, and they, you basically, I won't say basically, but you'd get to look at a series of pictures or photographs and rank them, I think, as to what you thought looked nice. And so that would certainly be a way we could maybe generate some input, because we have all the pictures. It's just of how do we get people to take a survey per se.
Sure.
And we've done plenty of surveys in the past, so that's what we were looking for today, is some additional ideas of how to. Thank you, Kermit, for that. No, I'm just kidding. So that's what we're looking for today.
Okay, I'm going to not play devil's advocate. I'm going to take a little opposite stand from you, Councilor Anderson, from the standpoint of who should do the open meetings. I guess I would like to see Chad's department or with Shannon work on public meetings, sending letters out to the ones are in violation now. Let's bring them and see if they'll come in, and you guys do 1 or 2 evenings in different situations there in each one of those, allowing those people, along with allowing people from the community to come in at the same time. They can then get the information compiled of what they find there and bring it back to Land Use Committee, at which time we could have some public input at that point if we felt there was needed. Would that make some sense?
That adds more padding to what I said, so I can't disagree with that.
Would you be willing to go ahead and do that?
Yeah, I would. I just the thing I fear is sending letters to these people, notifying they're in violation. Are they?
No, you don't have to do it that way. Just say,
we've randomly selected you.
Randomly selected you. Yeah, randomly selected you as lawbreakers. That kind of thing will go. No. But, yeah.
I think more of a letter saying that the city is looking at making changes to what is allowed in the right of way, and we're looking for public input on that. And here's what the ordinance says right now. That way they can look at the ordinance and say, wow, I guess I'm not in compliance, and hopefully that'll garner some interest.
We'll do this. We'll go back internally and talk about these couple ideas, and whether it's a letter, if we get a letter drafted, council will send it to you, and
we'll look at doing that, and then hopefully we can get this done by, let's see, August, September, maybe October meeting at the latest.
We could try for that.
One more thing, Chair?
Yes.
We briefly touched on permanent structures too in the right of way. I think that's something that we need to widen and take a look at a little stronger too before the next.
And I think we're potentially just going to rely on state law to help us with those. We can visit with the city attorneys more on that as well.
Okay. Does that meet everybody's approval if we do it that way? Yes. Greg.
Well, I'm certainly open to public comments all the time. It's important for sure. I'm just sitting here thinking that this issue isn't much different than, other nuisance, if you want to even call it a nuisance, other ordinances, just say it that way, other ordinances that we have. There's a ton of them that the public doesn't abide by and they don't know about, and they proceed in their life like there's no big deal, like the garbage cans. And educating the public on what the current ordinances are is a heck of a challenge. How you do it, I don't think we're going to fix that. But making the right, proper decisions here and creating ordinances that make sense and then enforcing them are probably the priorities. And the ideas that they came up with here are fine. I mean, they're regular, I think, acceptable practices. Anything exceeding 36 inches, I think, is probably going to cause a visibility, a safety issue. I mean, but so if we're concerned about how we educate the public, that's just different. It's just different than what is a good ordinance. And I know we're not here today to solve the education process. We're here to create good ordinances and build a great community. But I think what they've done here is right. And so I think we're almost starting down a path of educating, and that's not necessarily our job. That's all.
Okay.
I'd like to reply to that.
Okay, you got 1 minute. We got to move on.
You used a great example, the garbage cans. When we started talking about the garbage cans, how many phone calls did we get? How many people got interested and wanted to put their input in? This is the same thing. We are just now talking about it. We are just now telling the citizens that there are going to be some changes to the right-of-way. They need that time to give public input. That's why I'm asking for the 30 days.
So if let's plan on getting back in October, if you would, and if we can get that your public meetings and things done by that time, and you come back with a report on what your findings are after the meetings, that would be great. And thank you very much for your input and your report. We're going to move on now to agenda item number 2, B rather, number B, letter B, whatever, and get some input on what the annexation of Prairie Meadows is how that's coming along. Thank you all for being part of that. Michael.
Hello again, Mike Cooper. Mark Cotter and I are going to tag team on this. Just to kind of real quickly give you an update of where we're at. It's been a while since we've talked to you individually about the proposed annexation of Prairie Meadows. As you know, we've had a couple neighborhood meetings talking about the different options and what the desire of the city would be and the neighborhood in terms of working with that group to bring it up to city standards along with their sanitary sewer project. As a follow-up, we reached out to those people that did not attend the public meetings or did not sign the petition at that time. We offered one-on-one meetings with them to give them a chance to ask specific questions about their property, about the proposed assessment process. To remind you, there's 111 lots within this development with 76 property owners. And the one-on-one response, we should say, was very low. We had less than 10 people ask us to meet with them. The common concerns that we've heard throughout this process really are down to probably 2 or 3. One is that there are still people that believe there's no benefit to them with annexation.
Would you, I'm sorry, Mike, would you repeat that?
That there are some people that still believe that there's no benefit to the property owners with the annexation process. A second concern that we've heard is the corner lots. Those folks that live on corner lots where they have long frontages obviously are going to have a larger assessment than people that are on the interior lots. And so the question was, can we come up with a different way to help deal with those corner lot costs and assessments? The third thing that we heard is that a portion of this district is on the west side of the TLS Road, which is really outside of our immediate growth area, although we can, look into the future and see that someday would be served by city expansion. But some of the property owners that are on the west side of the TLS Road are asking, is there a way that we could leave some of that property out or give them the option of maybe just annexing the frontage portion of their property along Ellis Road? So as of now, we're at about 25% roughly of people that have said that they would voluntarily go along with the annexation and the assessments as we've discussed it previously. So we're a long ways from where we want to be of trying to reach that 75% to make it a voluntary annexation, as well as ensuring us that we can move forward with the assessments. So we don't believe at this point that we're where we want to be as city staff, and I think as a neighborhood as well. And so what Mark is going to do is just tell you kind of where we go from here. You know, we've talked about looking at other options. I know that you've asked for us to come back with a very specific list of options or other ideas. And what Mark is going to talk about next is kind of where we think we need to go with this bigger process as far as annexation and looking at it from a different perspective.
Thanks. Mark?
Thank you, committee chair and council members. It has been a journey that we've been on.
Identify yourself, please.
What's that?
Identify yourself.
Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. Sorry. So yes, thanks for having us. It has been a journey on this particular annexation, but you know, there's a number of them that we're working on concurrently. And some of the feedback, just with some of the existing customers that are current city, that are in the city limits of Sioux Falls, have read and have called and asked about this topic and said, you know, I live in Norton Froelich Edition, or I live in Emerald Acres Edition, and in some of those subdivisions that were annexed 20 and 30 years ago, there were steps taken that didn't require full city services to be put in, and now that those houses have changed hands maybe 1 or 2 or 3 times, they were not the original people, a lot's changed on how we access, what we use for street lighting, things of that nature. But they're saying, why were those subdivisions brought in and not required to be brought up to city standards? And it puts a lot of other pressures on it when there's not sidewalks, there's not adequate lighting, there's not adequate drainage. Now the roads are starting to deteriorate, asking what the city will do to bring them up to city standards. And so I think our takeaway is we've got about 25% of the people in Prairie Meadows, just that one specific, that are in support. That's 75% at least today that have not signed up. We know we've got questions of properties that have been annexed in the past that did not come up to full city standards, and I know we've even been asked here at the council level, does all those city standards have to be put in at once? And so as we've reflected on this information that we've just recently received from Deborah, because she conducted many of the one-on-one meetings, our approach is we've got a number of annexations that are ahead of us. Prairie Meadows is just one of them. There are cities all across the country that are working with a number of different areas that are annexing property. There's just recently an article that Omaha is going to annex 13 subdivisions all at once, and that's a major change for their population and how they do that. So our approach is with your support is we plan on having a steering committee. You know, that's been a very successful approach for us to formulate a steering committee, and really for about the next 75 days meet on a very routine basis, and by October 1st bring you back a long-term strategy on how we're going to work through a number of these annexations that are ahead of us, including Prairie Meadows. And our approach is it'll be multi-department: planning, legal, finance, public works. We've also reached out to Dean Karski, council chair, to have council involvement, and we invite Dean Karski and Rex Rolfing, the chair of the Land Use Committee, to be a part of that, so we can have council involvement all along this process and include it in the steering committee. So by October 1st, we can come back to the City Council land use with really a strategic plan that looks long-term, so we don't have a lot of these look-back issues that we're now starting to find. You know, we all were here when Old Orchard Heights, those roads needed to be reconstructed, and we've gotten through that. But ultimately, we've got a number of annexations ahead of us, and And so that's our approach. We've learned a lot through this journey, but also in the look back of a number of others. Councilman Jameson just called me probably a month or so ago about a small annexation that happened, that those are gravel roads. You know, those are things that we don't want to happen moving forward. And so that's our takeaway today, is that we'd like to kind of stay this issue for about 75 days, come back at October 1st, and really present to you our first draft of a long-term strategy. Okay.
Questions for Mark on this strategy? Yes, Greg, Councilor Jameson.
Thank you. Maybe not so many. I'm okay with the steering committee.
Okay.
It's a little bit like the can that gets kicked down the road because it's a tough can. Nobody wants to deal with it. It's troublesome for the landowners. It's hard for us to put that burden on those homeowners too. But a couple questions, if I could, concerning the properties that are west of T. Ellis Road. How big of an issue is it that get annexed in? Could that be lumped off? That's one. And then the second one is on the corner lots. If only the frontage of the home is calculated with the cost, and if the homeowner has no access that they want, no cut on the curb for their other side, is there another way? So those two items essentially, can you walk me through the troublesome parts of those?
Well, you know, I think just with the recent information, we've really heard now that the majority of the people, if not all the people west of T. Ellis Road, do not want to be annexed. And so some of that's new information to us. So it'll give us a chance to now go back and say, all right, what was planned? We weren't planning on upgrading T. Ellis Road, but we were planning on upgrading the sewer and the water. So it'll give us a chance to say, okay, if we take that amount of infrastructure out, what does that save the project? But it's also, what's the long term? Because if, say, that doesn't come in today, we want to make sure that those customers or future customers know what the path forward is. We do have customers that are outside the city that pay outside city water rates and wastewater rates. So we do have a mechanism in place for that. And so we'll talk about that and see. And with what Mike Cooper had mentioned, that it is outside of our today's growth line. The intention for that entire area that's west of T. Ellis Road is that there's a gravity sewer that will come from essentially where Cherry Lake is, near Family Park. And that'll go west, and then it'll go south all the way here. And all that gets served going north. And so we've just completed that sanitary sewer study. Over the course of the next inside of the next 10 years, elements of that will start to go in. So that's essentially, we've always got to identify how we're going to serve it long term with sewer before we bring the land in. It's my understanding that some of those property owners have a sewer that's fairly high, doesn't even serve their basements. Respect to the corner lots, that's another item we're going to tackle because we've reached out to this neighborhood, and that's been a recurring comment that we own two sides, and those property owners are seeing the highest amounts of assessment. So I don't want to predict where this goes, but I want you to know it's in one of our probably top three for this committee to tackle first. Okay.
You have one more?
Yeah, one of the last one I've just remembered. Are there some property owners within this area that are not going to be assessed because of some previous agreement or purchase at a certain time, or are there some that are in yellow, I guess, probably are the ones down towards the south. But if I remember right, I thought I had heard that some people had purchased these in a different way, and they won't be assessed the frontage. Are there anybody that's getting a free pass?
I'll have to check into that. There was comments about 48th Street and the city itself purchased a number of properties up along 41st Street, but I can't speak to that right off the top.
Okay. Well, that's just one idea.
Yeah, we can certainly follow up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson.
Mark, let's talk about what's annexed around this development. North of the area that you're showing that is west of the T. Ellis Road, between that and 267th Street, is that annexed in? That's along that, in that corner? That would be the southwest corner of 41st and T. Ellis Road?
Unless it's been done recently, what's in half-tone yellow is what's currently annexed. Michael? Yeah, what's half-tone yellow. So if you're seeing at that northwest corner of T. Ellis Road and 41st Street, that's not currently annexed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then to the east there, that farmland, that isn't annexed in either right now, correct?
That's not.
And this might be a question for Mike Cooper. Mike, I guess it would be. Mike, what is our outlook for this area as far as development? How quickly is that going to happen, do you think?
I think the area that's existing rural residential will continue to be residential. The corner of T. Ellis Road and 41st Street, we have zoned some commercial development there. And I see that happening in the future. That large vacant land that's east of here, that's not in the city limits, that, again, we've talked to that property owner a number of times. I see that as a combination of residential, office. At what time we were trying to get that to be the location for the Pettigrew Elementary School, along with another neighborhood park, but that's going to be a continuation of primarily residential.
Can you give me maybe just a guesstimate on a timeline? 5, 10 years?
I would say in that 5 to 10 years. I mean, a property owner can kind of determine the viability of when they want to be voluntarily annexed or not. But, we're upgrading 41st Street. This is the premier public works project for this year. And I think once that street gets done, people are going to start to see more demand for development along that corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Couple of things for either one of you. Question: if we didn't do the east or west of T. Ellis Road, how much would that be? Quite a bit of savings for the people in the other area, in the west or the eastern area.
We would have to look at that. I mean, we would have to look at what impact that would have on the total project cost, and then how that would affect each individual property owner.
The only other question I would have then would be on the task force or the committee you're putting together. Would you think it would be something we should look at to include some people from some prospective neighborhoods that would be potential, annexed, potentially annexed?
I think what I see happening with the steering committee would be that we would continue to look at these options, and then we would reach out, just like the previous discussion with the right-of-way, we would reach out to different neighborhood groups. We know the contact people for this area, and we know that there's others around us too. One of the things that really led us to the steering committee recently is that, we've been focusing so much on the specifics of Prairie Meadows. We don't want to make a decision or a recommendation that's going to tie our hands for the next annexation, and then we have to start over again. We'd like to generate some general community standards, we've heard that before today, that will help us deal with not only this one, but others in the future.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's what our intent is, with your assistance.
Yep. Okay, before we go any farther, I know there's people here from Prairie Meadows. Did you want to say anything? Are you here to listen? Do you have something you'd like to comment on, at this point? Okay. Okay. Yes.
One last question, if
One
possible.
last question.
Mark Cotter. Mark, you just said during conversation here that there are other areas that we provide sewer and water, I think sewer and water or storm sewer, without annexing them in, is that correct?
Yeah, we've got a couple areas on North Cliff Avenue that come to my mind, that we've got a couple customers out there that they're reachable by city utilities, and it's been some time, but there was arrangements made that we could hook them up, and then they would pay what they call out-of-city rates, and they are they're much more than in-city rates. Okay.
With that being said, is one of the options looking at replacing the storm sewer as far as, because that's the biggest problem in this whole thing, in this whole development, allowing that, because we have some time before that we're actually developed around them, to allow the neighborhood to recover, because once again, they only have a portion of the money to replace that. If we do the rest of it, then each lot would be assessed, correct?
Are you talking about now sanitary sewer?
Let's
Since
just
they've
say
got
if we just did the sanitary sewer.
yeah, since they've got the $800,000 grant.
Right, and the entire price is like 1.6 million, something like that is
Believe
what
so.
it's,
Yeah.
I think is what I've heard. If we just did the sanitary sewer and then allowed, 5-6 years for the neighborhood and those property owners to recover from those costs before we did the next stage. I know we want to do everything at one time, but if we're not, if we're not annexing them, we could hook them up, get that part done, let them pay on that first, and then look at annexation a little further down the road. Is that an option that is on the table or could be?
I think we're going to re-baseline with this steering committee, and I think the one key thing is we'd like to see this neighborhood not lose that grant. I mean, that's a huge gift to have that much forward to upgrade that sewer system, and so let us come back though, if you don't mind, because they've also, what we hear a lot of times out here is it's the storm drainage, but they've got the grant for the sanitary sewer. And we won't be able to make much of gains on storm drainage without curb and gutter. And so it all becomes together, and it's some of those issues of the past that we don't want to repeat, doing partial and then not doing full. So anyway, but I certainly understand your comment, and we'll take it back.
As you know, I've been involved in this in the very early stages, and a lot of the neighbors have asked me to try to stay involved in this, even though it's not my district or anything. But I just think this is something that, as you stated, and I think everybody understands, is that, this is going to set precedent on how we do some annexations in the future.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very good.
The reason it's important for the steering committee to do its job and do it well, and then come back in October. Our October meeting will be the third one of the month, so you'll have a little bit more than 75 days to get it ready. And with the consensus of the committee that we should go ahead with the steering committee, I will task you with that, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in October.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay. Any other open discussion then from the committee?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.